Hey, everybody, welcome back to Remotely Serious. My next conversation is one I am excited to share with you. It's a conversation with a digital nomad, Grayson Harris, who has not taken maybe the typical approach or doesn't fit the typical stereotype about being a digital nomad. He has an engineering job that he has simply taken remote. He's not trying to be an Amazon dropshipper or a blogger or a YouTube influencer necessarily. He's someone who has simply taken a typical job that you might find in any city around the world, a really good engineering job, and he has moved his life to be remote first, and he's continuing to work for his job and living the remote lifestyle. So we get into how that happened, why he chose that life, and learnings that he's had in pursuing this path. So let's jump right in. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Remotely Serious. I'm here with Grayson Harris. We met at Running Remote recently. I guess it's going on 2 months ago, maybe not quite 2 months ago. We met in Lisbon. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was a sunny couple of days there, if I recall. And yeah, Grace, we met on the patio, and I'm excited to talk to you because I think there's a certain perception of what kind of job or what kind of path a remote worker has taken. And you mentioned you worked in engineering and power engineering. And those were, when I think of those kinds of firms, they're not the ones that jump out as maybe the first ones to jump on board with remote work in 2020 or even earlier or later. I'm just curious, maybe how long have you been a remote worker? And maybe do you consider yourself a digital nomad? And what were you up to before coming to Lisbon in late April of 2023?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for, bringing me on the pod. And it was definitely awesome connecting with you at Running Remote. It was a pretty awesome conference. That was my first time there. And I really just love the community of the conference. Everybody's extremely welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
It was great just kind of meeting other remote workers, digital nomads. As far as myself, I definitely identify as a digital nomad for about 2 years now. And you're definitely right. I think at the conference, I don't think I met another person in my industry.
What would you call your industry? I said power engineering, but I want to make sure I get it right. What would you
Yeah,
consider
power
your industry?
engineering, like the utility industry,
Yeah.
the energy industry.
So something that jumps out is, I'm not talking about your employer, your firm, but stereotypically, it jumps out as one where the conversation about remote work might be a bit awkward. It might be some older folks with a lot of experience getting stuff done at whiteboards and around, AutoCAD on monitors in an office. So what was the first ever conversation to become a digital nomad or a remote worker like with your employer, if you're able to share that?
It's a really good question, and it's kind of a long story, but I can kind of give you the highlights. It's kind of serendipitous and stuff. But during COVID, there's kind of two types of companies, right? There was the company like my previous employer, which was, hey, remote work doesn't work. The second we can get back into the office, we need to, you know. And then there's companies like the one I'm at now, which they went remote, and then they saw this potential benefit, like hiring people across the U.S. instead of just in Denver, where it was located. And yeah, and so like I said, I was at a previous company that really wasn't into this whole idea. I had actually brought up kind of doing something like a digital nomad in January 2020. They said no, remote work doesn't seem to work, but like maybe in a few years, we'll think about it. But really, no. And it was kind of funny. Basically, around that same time, I was at the locker room of a gym and just kind of talking with some people how I love to travel and would like to live abroad, but I think I need to get out of my industry to do that. And the guy's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm an electrical engineer. And the guy behind me says, "Oh, where do you work?" And I tell him, and he's like, "Okay." And ended up he worked at like a direct competitor of mine as like the president of that company. Fast forward to August 2020, and he kind of messaged me out of the blue on LinkedIn saying how I am, if I'm been able to travel yet. And we started the conversation. I basically said, "Hey, what I want to do." And yeah, basically the agreement was after 6 months of working in the office or from home in Denver, I would be able to start nomading.
So you switched jobs to an employer who was able to give you a, I won't say hybrid deal, but they gave you a trial period in the office, and then after that you were able to go work around the world. How did you choose your first destination? Were you in Colorado while this was happening? You're working, you're going to an office, and the clock's ticking. 5 months, 4 months, 3 months from now, I'll be able to go anywhere. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, so the timing was about May 2021. So anywhere's a little bit relative, right? Because the world was just
Right.
opening back up from
Yeah.
COVID at that time.
How quickly I forget. Oh yeah, it was 2021. You could just go anywhere. Absolutely not.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And
I've
you know,
purged it from my mind.
yeah, I mean, that's another reason why I kind of had that 6 months is that was part of my proposal to the company. You know, it's for a few reasons. One was nothing was open. There's some other reasons, right? Kind of building camaraderie and stuff like that with people on my team. But really, I just kind of looked at what was open. My best friend who worked at the company last minute decided, hey, I want to go with you. And we really were talking about Europe, and Croatia was about the only country at that time that was open. And so we kind of just started there, and really the first few months was kind of navigating, everything as it was opening in Europe.
Did you know about Croatia as a digital nomad destination, or was it more that you knew about the country for other reasons? I just know that because cities like Dubrovnik and Split and other regions of Croatia are actively looking to market themselves as nomad destinations and remote work destinations. So I'm curious if you just knew about it from being younger or thinking about it. Oh, I'd love to backpack through Croatia, kind of the association with backpacking through Europe, or did you get specific marketing or receive specific marketing saying this is a good nomad destination, or it's just it's the happenstance of it was the only country that was open and better will be cool to go there instead of Asia or somewhere else, because I guess Asia was also closed. And
Yeah, a lot of those closed. I think Asia was still pretty much closed. South America was pretty random. Some places were completely locked down. Other places started to open up. It was really the latter. It was really just like, hey, we want to go to Europe. Some places are talking about opening, like Greece was talking about opening. And that's where we ended up going second. But at the time, it was really Croatia's open, so let's try it out. I haven't really heard anything about it.
where did you go first in Croatia?
We based for the month in Split.
And was that in the old town, or how did you find your accommodations?
Yeah, it was in Old Town, did the whole Airbnb thing, lived together with my buddy to kind of get a little bit of a nicer place in the best location, right?
Yeah.
And I just kind of, like I said, the next few months in Europe, we really just navigated what opened. So we did Greece and France. Pretty interesting time to be a nomad, but it was really awesome to kind of be able to experience it.
So you're based in an Airbnb in the old town of Split, and for people that don't know this, it's on the Adriatic Sea, near several, an archipelago. I don't know how to say that word. Archipelago of Croatian islands that's essentially across the way from the east coast of Italy, and so you have this Balkan Adriatic coast of Croatia and Montenegro, and eventually Albania and in Greece all the way down. And so you're in this old town. You can picture it. Dubrovnik's old walls are maybe a more of a famous picture, but Split also has an amazing old town and a Roman emperor's palace. So when you're getting acclimatized there, and you're also, I assume, have 8 hours of work with your employer doing engineering, I assume on a laptop with probably some data writing and maybe some visual intensive work for the line of work you're in. How was that first week of being in a Roman emperor's palace, old town in an old European city, but also doing work for your employer?
I kind of remember back to, I think my very first Instagram post when I was like nomading was, started the weekend homeless and ended up in a palace, right? And it was just a crazy turnaround. I think just that very first week, me and my friend were just like, yeah, this is it. This is what we want to do. Love that independent, like location independent lifestyle where you can say, hey, I want to live here for a while, or hey, I want to try out this. And being in Split, you get that like the history and stuff like that, and especially at first, I've evolved a lot as a digital nomad over the last 2 years, but at first you just want to do every single thing like every single day. You're go working, the 8 hours, or really my first couple months I was working extra to kind of prove that I can do this. And at the same time, then all your extra hours are, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to hit everything, right? So the first month or two are pretty crazy.
There's that inclination in the first days of a new arrangement with an employer where you almost overwork or do a couple extra hours, or maybe even stay up late or get up early on whatever the different time zone is, just to show that you are definitely, it's still totally normal, still totally working. And then I think over time you evolve the trust where you might be on a different time zone and that's okay, and you negotiate the overlap. And of course, each company is different, case by case. Some want synchronous overlap, some are okay with async. Maybe jumping forward, what are the biggest things that have changed for you as a nomad from the first couple months where you were sharing a place to now? Is there anything where you can just point to something and say, it's just so different? I thought I should do this, or I thought it would be best to do this. Now I know that's wrong. I do things a different way.
For sure. There are a ton of things. One of the big things that come to mind is just kind of relaxing and understanding no matter how long I'm in a place, whether it's a week, a month, 2 months. For me, my list only gets longer of the places I want to visit. I can maybe check some off, and sometimes I check some off more than others. But always when you're there, your list is going to get longer. So you're always going to have that fear of missing out, that FOMO of not doing this, not doing that. But really, to me, the thing that changed with that is feeling like I'm living in a place and not traveling, right? Because there's a very different mindset with that. It's like the first few months, like I was saying, I would go to the gym 3 times a week. The other 2 mornings, it was, okay, I'm going to do this museum or go walk around and do this. And now it's really just, I want to go over here. I want to surf. I want to go to Brazil and surf a few, for a month.
Did you pick up surfing as a nomad, or had you already done it in the United States?
I've done a little bit in the US growing up, and then for me, I'm kind of a hobby junkie. So one of my favorite parts about nomading is saying, oh, I want to go here, I want to surf. I went to the Dominican Republic, and I'm about to go to Peru coming up to kite surf. It's always something I wanted to try, or hiking. I can just say, hey, I want to try this, or really do this for a while, and picking a place just for that. One of the things I'm really trying to do right now is kind of focus more on these hobbies, slow down a little bit, and really go for more of a purpose to places.
Yeah, I foresee a type of workation, and I don't think it's really taken off yet, but I think it's taken off in small ways. Maybe it's still quite a niche. There are certainly workation packages. I'm using the word workation. I don't know if it's totally familiar to all the listeners, but just the idea that if we think about a workation, it's where you, on a typical tourist group package, you might go somewhere for 3 weeks. It's a European tour or a cruise up to Alaska from Vancouver, from Los Angeles, or it's a Caribbean island resort, all inclusive, and you go there and certain things are taken care of, whether it's travel or food or all the food for 2 or 3 weeks. There's variations on the all-inclusive vacation, the group package through Europe. And a workation is an emerging concept where the same kind of curation is done, except there's the provision for people being able to work 6 to 8 hours a day. There's the understanding that people aren't there to pack their full day through of activities and hit the things on the itinerary, but the understanding that the attendees will need quiet, good Wi-Fi co-working space, and they will need the time to work, but that in the evenings and weekends, they've signed up for something where they want to see Argentina for a month, or Belize or Bulgaria for 2 weeks, and they're there for a workation. So I say all that as a preamble about workations in order to say, I think there's a step further in workations where there is the connection to the hobby, like you mentioned, where the goal of a month-long workation in Sao Paulo or in Madeira is to learn Portuguese or be functionally fluent in Portuguese by the end of 2 or 3 months, let's say. Maybe it probably can't learn the language in 2 weeks, but let's say after 3 months, and there's structure around that. And it's almost like it's some of the video gamification of life in a good way, I think, where you're saying my quest when I'm on this particular vacation is not just to be there, and it is to live there, but it's also to learn to kite surf or to improve my kite surfing. So individually, I think most people will still live their lives individually and go do that. But I'm not sure, actually, that's a good segue into, have you ever done anything where you are going somewhere and signing up for something, or doing a workation or a month-long stay or week-long stay that is a group event, or have you been solo or with your friend the whole time?
It's really, really mixed, to be honest. I've done a lot solo. I've done a lot with my 1 or 2 best friends. I actually just finished up 2 months with my dad.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty a unique thing.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what I'm looking for, and you kind of have those friends that you really want to like travel with and kind of go out of your way for. Otherwise, it's just, hey, I want to try this hobby. So another one I did was, me and my best friend went to Belize to scuba dive for a month.
Yeah.
Just like you're saying with Spanish, one of my friends, we really wanted to learn Spanish. We did 2 months in Medellin, doing Spanish classes almost every single day. And I really think that's a great segue for people that are maybe working, and maybe they're curious about the nomad life, or they just kind of want to get out. For me in Denver, I love snowboarding, but also once it gets to about March, I'm kind of sick of the coldness. So just go for a month and warm up, go to the beach, go surfing. try scuba diving. And I think that's a great way to kind of try out the life as well, almost like a test run.
How has it been with your work setup? So are you taking one laptop everywhere and sort of flipping it open, or does any of the nature of your work demand that you need anything more than that? How has that been?
Yeah, I like to think I'm a minimalist in a lot of ways. I'm not as bad as some people. I've seen some people travel with like 3 monitors and stuff like that, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I do have a small monitor. It's a graphics tablet. I thought at first I'd kind of have to use that for my job, and now it's just a second monitor. But it's really just a laptop, a little monitor. I take everything I need for work in my carry-on. That way, worst case scenario, which has happened once, if your suitcase is out for a couple of days, the airline loses it. You still have everything you need to work. So you're not going to be missing out. You might just need to get some new clothes for the few days.
And then I know this is kind of like going through, I think this is interesting to our listeners, is kind of going through the minutia. But I'm just curious also, you're American, and in the United States, there's a big thing around healthcare being tied to the employer. How did you navigate healthcare or health insurance while you were going to many different countries with different health systems?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's one of those things that you really need to decide for yourself. There's a lot of options out there for digital nomad kind of healthcare. For me, my company, it covers me for emergencies abroad.
Yeah.
Whatever that is determined by the insurance company. And so far, I've just stuck to that. What I've found is for the couple of times that I have gone to the doctor for tests or a little bit of sickness here and there, it's really never been compared to the US. Nothing that's broken the bank. I remember I spilled hot boiling coffee on myself in Dominican Republic, had to go to the emergency room. It was about $60 US, right?
Yeah. This is not medical advice for any of our listeners, but there's lots of nomad thought leaders and folks that will just say, especially if you're in places like Mexico, Colombia, I shouldn't speak too much of it if I don't know the precise details, but suffice to say, in many places, the recommendation is you can just pay cash and you'll be okay. Again, I don't know. I'm not saying do that everywhere. In fact, you probably should do your own research. But yeah, it's interesting. Has there ever been a place where you showed up for any reason where you quasi committed to it? Maybe you bought accommodations for 2 weeks, or you got a co-working membership or something for a week or 2 or 4, and it just like turned out not to be what you expected, and you either had to scramble to find your happy place for working, or you had to change your accommodations. Is there anything where the nomad life posed challenges and it wasn't all rosy?
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of things that come to mind. I think one was, again, kind of going back to the initial travels, one of my biggest flubs was late 2021. I was going from Turkey. I was supposed to be going to Italy. And the last minute, the day before, I realized that there's 2 countries in all of Europe they can't travel to from Turkey, and Italy is one. So I kind of scrambled. I was trying to do maybe like a cheap place, just lost that money for rent, unfortunately. And so I decided upon Poland. This is,
was the problem like you literally can't, there wasn't a direct flight, or you can't get there somehow?
No, it's the COVID regulation. You just
I
can't,
see. You just
can't go
literally
from Turkey.
could not go. Yeah.
Right. It was a red list just for Italy, not the rest of the Schengen zone or anything like that. So I decided to do Poland in the beginning of November, beginning of December. And keep in mind, I really was traveling for summer, and Poland in December is quite cold.
Yeah.
I luckily went to like a thrift store and got like a big jacket, but that was probably one of those months where I said I love Krakow, I love Poland, but for me at that time it was not my favorite, and I kind of just rolled with the punch for the rest of the month. But that was definitely one of my bigger flubs, and it is definitely by no means all rosy in this life.
So you've been doing this, and all this time, you're living your life. You're probably feeling like you're learning a lot of things and getting access to almost like it's kind of like getting access not to a secret society. It's not a secret at all. It's totally out in the open that this type of lifestyle is possible. But you still start to observe things. I find you start to observe things that put perspective back in, put life back home in perspective. And it can often feel like you're doing it alone, or you're learning on forums, or you maybe think, I'm around all these tourists, or I'm around the locals in Croatia. Where are all the other digital nomads? And so I'm just curious, did you meet other nomads besides your main friends as you traveled, or did you feel like you were kind of going through it on a solo adventure or with a couple friends, but did you feel like, oh, I've arrived, I've found the other nomads in the community and we all hang out? Did that kind of thing happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my first 3 months, I was with my best friend, and admittedly, I really met no other nomads. I didn't go to a co-working. I didn't really try and put myself out there. To be honest, I was enjoying the time with my friend,
Yeah.
and we made some travel friends, but really no other nomads. So my first month solo, I went to Bulgaria, Varna. It's on the Black Sea for the summer. Went to a co-working, and it was just like my life completely changed, right? I remember being this co-working for the first time, and I would take out my headphones because, coming in my industry, the conversations I would hear, in my old cubicle in office, were very technical, maybe a little boring. Where also these are completely new conversations of entrepreneurs helping each other out, different stuff like that. And I was really exposed to the nomad community there, and really since then, co-working has been one of my must-haves when I go to a place. I actually don't like to work from home. I'm kind of an odd digital nomad where he doesn't like to work from home. He's at a co-working. I'm at one right now in Serbia, and yeah, so that's kind of a must-have. And really finding the community is huge for me, even if I am traveling with a friend.
So did you find the kinds of people that were working at the co-working spaces were in startups and tech? That seems to be a stereotype, that a lot of digital nomads are entrepreneurs doing tech, and that wasn't necessarily what you were doing. What was that kind of acclimatization to this subculture in the co-working spaces like once you started meeting people?
Definitely, yeah. I would say I'm still a unicorn. I've met actually a couple of people in my couple of years that are doing something similar to me, but it's very rare in my experience. A lot of people, especially at first, were kind of the entrepreneurs, bloggers, uh, small-time influencers, or they own some agency, something like that. I do think that as time has gone on, you are finding more of the 9 to 5 nomads, that I kind of call, and there's different forms of that as well.
Yeah, I might just get on my soapbox for one quick second and say
Hmm.
that I think that there's a absolute fallacy, there's a total myth around becoming a digital nomad, or the concept of a digital nomad or even a remote worker, is that it's all packaged up with, oh, so you want to be a digital nomad? Okay, well, go start an Amazon drop shipping business or a D2C Instagram brand or a blog or build an iOS app and
Hmm.
become an indie hacker or startup founder and become a digital nomad. I think that's changing a little bit, but
Hmm.
I would say, first of all, unless you actually really, really, really want to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to be. It's not for everyone, and no one should think that they need to do that in order to be like, a digital nomad. And the vast potential for digital nomads and remote work is to be able to work for whatever job makes you happy and is what you want to do in life, and work remotely. And that should, I shouldn't, I don't want to say should, I'm not saying anyone should do but there, I think people could be open to the fact that the future of remote work is just people, the millions and millions of people that don't want to be tech entrepreneurs, which is most
Right.
people. And we're in a big tech recession right now, so I think it's a sweet life to have a job you like or a job you love, and the ability to remote work and then go live life. And so I'm making that public service announcement right now, because I think that there's too much wrapped up in Instagram influencer slash digital
Yes.
nomad slash traveler, and that's nothing. That's just Instagram. That's Twitter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know, like you said, it's kind of going away a little bit, but there's always that thing where you need to do what you love, and you need to have the lifestyle that you love. And so to be a digital nomad, you need to quit your job, you need to find out what you love and do that, and then you can do this lifestyle. And that's awesome if people can do that. But not only are you asking somebody to completely change their lifestyle, you're also asking somebody to completely change their occupation, right? And not
Yeah.
everybody can be an entrepreneur, and that's just a really hard two things to do. So maybe you do want to become an entrepreneur one day. Myself, that's something I'm thinking about. But use your current job to get the lifestyle that you want, and maybe you're good with that. Maybe it kind of solves everything, the problems that you thought you had. Maybe down the line, then if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can kind of take that next step. You don't necessarily need to do everything all at once, for sure.
Yeah, if you think about if you were going to make a sudden dietary change and up your workouts from once a week to 7 times a week and learn a new language all within a 60-day period, I think that's what some people are trying to do if they
Right.
all at once quit their job and launch a personal brand and try and launch a profitable or growth business all in one fell swoop of a big cleaver that comes through their life and cleaves off the past life and starts the new life. And
Mhm.
some of the influencing, I think it is evolving, and there's more pragmatic advice out there, but
Yeah.
it's evolving. But there's so much. This is I'm maybe fighting the battles of 2020 and 2021, 2019, and earlier in terms of the digital nomad marketing. But yeah, I guess so. But you like to go to co-working spaces. You're sort of acclimatizing to these new types of people, and just there's a self-selection bias around people that have chosen to go to Bulgaria or Serbia or Medellin and work in a co-working space. It's
Mhm.
like going to New York or going to London or something like that, or going to a rural area. It's people that want to live in the big city. There's people that want to live out on the farm, and then there's
Yeah.
people that want to go to Bulgaria and Serbia and Medellin and work in co-working spaces thousands of miles from where they grew up. We met at Running Remote, and I actually think that that conference I went the first time in 20 what is it? It's 2023 now. So the first time I went was in 2022 in Montreal. I'm Canadian,
Okay.
so it was in my home country, although I still had to get across the country because I'm on the West Coast. And I was on the West Coast at the time. Was this the Lisbon edition in 2023 your first Running Remote?
It was my first in person. Technically, I kind of last year won a free ticket to the virtual,
Right.
a free virtual pass last year, and I really started watching some of those sessions, and that really I was like, oh, this is actually really, really cool. This is really related to a lot of the things that I'm kind of looking to change in my occupation and that I'm more interested in, and so I kind of went from that to say, okay, I'm gonna definitely be there next year.
So the content around how enterprises can the various talks. So for those, if you haven't listened to previous episodes or you don't know what Running Remote is a conference that have been doing it, I think, since several years before the pandemic. I don't know
Mhm.
the official inauguration year, but essentially the programming is centered around bringing in essentially the best thinkers and speakers in enterprise remote work that are talking about best practices for working async, how to lead a team, how to create an HR strategy, how to do hiring and firing, how to make sure the culture doesn't get scattered because everybody's all around the world, how to do on-sites and retreats every quarter. And so it's not, I'm making it sound like it's really didactic, how to do this, how to do that, how to do that. It's actually quite open-ended. There's lots of panels. It's very charismatic and fun and interesting. It's not like do this, do this, do this. And I think that there's a mix of people that go, and so it sounds like you are. Is it the kind of thing where you are listening to these things with a direct line back to I want to bring this into my organization or with my employer, or is it more it's interesting intellectually, if you know what I mean? And but it may or may not be that you advocate for all this stuff back at your employer. It's just sort of a personal interest.
Yeah, it's for sure the first. I'm really trying to bring a lot of these things back to my company. I guess maybe taking a step back. So just living this life of really, I love this lifestyle, and remote work kind of lets me get there, right? And one of the things that I had to do was changing how I work. So when I started in Europe, I was 3 hours of overlap. I dwindled that down to zero when I was in Asia, and kind of had to change how I work for that. And so I was starting to do some of the kind of remote work best tips just in order to survive, right? These async things. I was kind of looking for any information I could. And just with this lifestyle, I just became really passionate about remote work and trying to bring these things to my company, which is an agile one for our industry, but we still have a long ways to go. So that I was really trying to get some big takeaways from the conference and from these leaders in the tech industry. In our industry, we can't necessarily move as super fast as some of these. We're not going to be implementing AI tomorrow to take over all these different things in our company, but we can implement a lot of these other things that people are talking about at Running Remote, and that's definitely something I'm trying to bring back to my company right now.
I want to imagine a listener to this podcast who's maybe they're driving in their car, maybe they're on their commute to work at the office, and they hear something like, I had 0 hours of overlap in Asia. And in their mind, they're listening. If this is you, if you're listening, just we know you're there, and we're talking to you, and what I what I want you to do, Grayson, is almost imagine, is there something tangible from going async? So again, I'll define this term again for the listeners, just because we've used it. I think I've used it a couple times, or you used it a couple times. Async, which is short for asynchronous, is a term to refer to a mode of work where it's not assumed that the classic multiple meetings per day or multiple meetings per week are happening on the same time zone or even in the same place. It's assumed that various tools, like, to use a simple example, Google Docs or a project management software, is being used, and people can contribute to visuals, designs, deliverables, collaborations, what have you, on their own time. So you wake up, you're in a different time zone, and then you see some notes have been left on something that you proposed 8 hours ago. 3 of the decision makers have weighed in. Okay, great. I didn't need to have a meeting with them because I did some really great documentation, made my case. I maybe even recorded a video of myself explaining some of the finer points with a whiteboard that's captured by a screen capture.
Yep.
And then they gave me my decision, and boom, we each spent 10 minutes logging in on our own time, and then we made a decision, and we didn't need to have a 1-hour meeting with donuts in the Arbutus room, or some boardroom at the office, the Douglas Fir room, or whatever. People are wondering, like, why did you say that? I in the Pacific Northwest, I remember growing up, there was always these rooms that they would name after trees. Like an important room would be the fir room. The Arbutus is a tree, and I don't think it's across the world that much, but in the Pacific Northwest, there's Arbutus trees. They have like bark that peels off like skin. Anyway, to circle it back, there's this listener who's like, you had 0 hours of overlap in Asia. There's no way that work can get done without meetings, without even without just being on chat at the same time. Is there any kind of tangible thing, even like a specific piece of software, a specific habit that you learned while you're on a really different time zone that got you from, maybe this is really hard, to, hey, this is easier or better, or work functions async? Is there anything from you mentioned Asia is 0 hour overlap, right? No overlap with North America. So what's the journey there from 0 hours to, like, I'm functioning and this is working, even though we don't meet necessarily every day?
Yeah, man, it was a pretty awesome journey. And speaking to this listener that we're talking to, you might not be able to do 0 hours of overlap right now, kind of where I'm at. That's probably not super realistic either, but you can probably do less than you think. And some of the ways to get there are being proactive. I mean, this is one of the biggest ones. Seeing what you're going to be doing the next day, getting ahead of that, making sure that the people that are doing work for you have everything that they need. What you need from people, you're getting that way ahead of time. Predicting, you can get to a level where you're predicting whether people need from you. So if you need a meeting, you can set that up. You kind of mentioned it, but using looms or these little videos where you can share your screen and talk out some complex things, which for me in engineering, I was using a lot. So being proactive is a really, really huge one. Another one that comes to mind is low context communication. When you're in 0 hours of overlap in Asia, if I tell somebody to do something for me and I don't explain it, they're going to get in and they're going to say, what? Or be confused, do the wrong thing, maybe not do it at all. So using low context communication, really almost over explaining, assuming the person you're talking to, doesn't know this at all. So taking that little extra time to really read it over explain a little bit is going to save a ton of time in the back end as well.
Nice. Yeah. Exercise over. It's been really helpful for our skeptical listener who doesn't believe that async work. You're free. That listener, you can relax now. We're not targeting you anymore. We're not thinking about you anymore. We just wanted to speak directly into the microphone to you for 3 or 4 minutes. Now that you're several years into this and you're continuing to work for your employer, there's not some entrepreneurs sometimes get pulled to where their market is, or there's something that pulls them in a certain direction. You truly have kind of this link to your employer and then complete freedom. Again, maybe not complete freedom. There's various, countries that are closed or open, but there's more countries that are open now in 2023. Do you have a sense of how long this mode will go? Did you think of it like this is forever, or this is just how I live now? Or is it more, something that's I'll explore this and continue to do it for several years, and then, as some people like to phrase it in this subculture, I'm going to quote unquote find a base. People talk about finding a base. Oh, I'm going to find a base in Portugal. I'm going to find a base in Central America. Does that terminology resonate with you, or is it just, hey, I'm from the US, I might go back there sometime, but I'm just traveling?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm really just wanting to keep going. And I really don't ever want to not be location independent. I don't ever want to kind of be in a situation where, hey, you have to live here. I think I'm eventually going to get some home bases around the world is kind of the fantasy. But really right now I'm kind of continuing on. I think, I kind of just reevaluated actually pretty recently and how I want to move around. And I think I'm going to start, doing 2-3 months in a place where typically I'm really just doing a month. So start slowing down a little bit. And I think it's just gonna change like that. Maybe it's going to get to 6 months in a place, or a year, or 6 months, 1 month, whatever. But yeah, I think the big thing for me is maintaining my location independence, and also asking myself how I'm feeling. Right now I'm definitely wanting to slow down for a couple of reasons, but then maybe I'll want to speed back up again. And I think just really checking in with yourself is a huge part of the digital nomad life that we can kind of get away from, but really making sure you're aligning with your priorities with that.
There was something I noticed at this running remote that was, I think it might have been there in Montreal the year before, but it felt like it was a growing trend, which was the destinations themselves coming and marketing their destination as a attractive place for remote workers and digital nomads. So Buenos Aires was one of them. Tenerife, the island in the Spanish island, was another one of them. If we can indulge in one more exercise of imagining the persona of a listener, let's just say one of these, we'll call them tourism marketers. It's not really tourism. One of these ministers of tourism or destination marketers for digital nomads and remote workers is listening right now. Let's say that they're the mayor of a fake city. Well, they're the mayor of a place, a city. Let's say city, not a country. That is, they just got the directive on their desk from the mayor and the treasury of the mayor's office. It says, you got $1 million, you got €1 million, £1 million, £1 million pesos, whatever. You got a budget to promote this destination as somewhere that's attractive to digital nomads and remote workers. For you, Grayson, are there certain things that resonate with you? And do you feel like there's anything that the cities or the destinations can do? You're someone that's essentially voting with your spending. You will spend money somewhere, and we assume you're like, we don't assume, we know you're a great guy. You're not going to cause trouble. You're going to be a net positive, and you're going to spend money there. Is there anything they can do to attract you, or do you get your information from peer-to-peer, Reddit, networks, other people? I'm just wondering, I think there will be more and more destinations looking to capture the economic benefits of remote workers while also managing the perceived political negatives of gentrification and some of the backlash. That's also part of their job. But they will be looking to attract the economic benefits of remote workers. Is there something they can do better or do to attract you?
100%. I would tell them to, look at or maybe hire Gonzalo Hall. For people who don't know, he kind of started
very
the community.
Specific, tactical, great advice. Just hire Gonzalo Hall. That's it.
he started the community in Madeira. I was actually just there right before Serbia, and for a digital nomad, one of the biggest things that people are worried about is being lonely. And
were you in
an
Ponta do Sol or Funchal when you were there?
I stayed in Funchal.
Yeah, that's a great city, isn't it? I was amazed by it. Sorry to just kind of get on a tangent, but I think it's just an awesome city to highlight just for a second. Just the way that it's a Portuguese island, closer to Africa and the Moroccan coast than it is probably to the Portuguese, the Iberian coast. And it really goes up this volcanic side of a mountain where the city just, I don't even know how to describe. You can say something like Vancouver, Hong Kong, San Francisco in the way that they're vertical and have hills, but it almost doesn't convey it. It's like literally a city that just goes up the side of a volcano. I think if I've got the geology right. But anyway, Funchal is a great place. Sorry to interrupt your highlighting of how Gonzalo built community there, but I love Madeira and wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, no worries. It's one of my favorite places, and one of the great things is just the community that he's built there. You can get there in day one, you can open up a Slack, and for all these different communities around Madeira, they post daily activities that you can go and instantly meet people. And so really getting, other tourist boards or other cities to not necessarily do the same thing. I would love that, but having some sense of community, and that can be as simple as, having hotels build co-working spaces, right? It kind of all starts with the co-working space. Like I said, if I don't see a co-working space in the city, I'm probably gonna go to a different one. All the way up to the model that Gonzalo is doing in Madeira, or I went to his village in Pipa, Brazil, where it's great for surfing. And again, you kind of show up and there's instant access to all these other digital nomads in a community with that.
Yeah, and maybe just to even pump up Gonzalo even a little more, it started in Madeira. That's the biggest one, but essentially he's created a model, and this is almost I don't want to say the inverse or the flip side of the workation. It's adjacent to the workation, and I'm sure, of course, Gonzalo would argue, and I might even argue too, that this is in some ways a superior experience, or it's a definitely competitive experience to going on a workation. So if you think about a workation, 4 weeks in Honduras or 4 weeks in Croatia, and maybe your accommodation is taken care of, it's still a commercial endeavor for the workation operator to take whatever it is, $3,000 of your money for a quote unquote all-inclusive month, or a month where your accommodation and co-working is taken care of. You probably still have to pay for your food on the vast majority of them, but it's essentially, we want to package up a new version of a tour for you. What Gonzalo is doing is, and I don't know, I think the model, the business model or the private public partnership model is different in each of the villages that he's done. And he's done them in Portugal and in Cabo Verde, in an African island nation off the coast of Africa, and also now in Brazil, in Pipa in the Northeast. And I think that the model is different in each one. And so I don't want to say it's a nonprofit. I don't know. I think it's a combination of things, but it is more expansive. And it's that sense of just, I know what you mean, landing in Madeira, and you kind of open the Slack group, and it's not like you're paying for an event or something, or a tour. It's just a community you can join. And it's more community driven, in the words that he would use, to be able to just say, hey, there's some people doing this, there's some people doing that. I'm not like on a group tour. I just show up somewhere, meeting other people and getting acclimatized to the locals and the community and everything that's going on really easily. So we'll see. I mean, and we'll see what things can support that. I think Slack, as cliche as it is, simply just having a Slack or a Discord, as basic as that is, does change an entire experience of being somewhere for a month for a lot of people, especially when it's done well, like the Madeira Nomads Slack.
Right. Yeah. Talking about the loneliness, it's a very easy thing to experience, and I've definitely experienced it in places. I would say if you're really worried about that, Madeira, one of these communities, is a great place to start out. If you're feeling lonely in Madeira, it might be your fault, because there's activities every single day. It's, go to one of those, and there's people just like you wanting to meet other people that are there. So
yeah. Yeah, I agree. If you're feeling lonely, it's your fault. In Madeira specifically. This isn't the most important thing, but I do, for those that are listening to this podcast, have never heard of some of these places at all. There's a lot of stuff that's just like really quick to people that have remote worked, certain places and names and things that are really familiar. Madeira might not be as familiar to people that have no connection to remote work or digital nomadism yet. But if you imagine going to Lisbon, what is it? Is it like a couple hours, an hour and a half to fly to Funchal Airport from the capital, or the biggest city, capital of the region, I guess, a county. I'm not sure what Madeira is, but it is a specific kind of autonomous district. Getting a bit nerdy, but anyway, you fly from Lisbon to Funchal, and that's not very long of a flight, and it's usually a fairly inexpensive flight. And then you have this island, which is not necessarily the same as the Spanish islands that are famous and familiar around. It's not necessarily tons of sandy beaches, but it has a unique ecosystem and microclimate and biome that uniquely evolved because it is this island, this volcanic island separated from the continent. And then you got Funchal, the biggest city, which is still a couple 100,000 people, I think, and then towns and villages and beautiful nature all around the island as well. So, what you would do if you were sitting in Colorado, if you're in Boulder, and you're like, I want to do this. What you just said, Madeira, never heard that word before. Gonzalo, I'm going to look him up. digital nomad community, I'm gonna go find out what that is. All you really have to do is probably get to JFK or get somewhere, Atlanta, Dallas. You take a flight to Lisbon, and then 2 hours later, you're in this place off the coast of Northern Africa, Portuguese island. It's I don't want to make it trivial that it's not that hard, but it's not as far away as you think, and it's easier to do than you think. And as you've mentioned and we've gone over, there's built-in activities and things to do right away. And it's actually amazing. It's not necessarily just some, I want to pump it up. It's not just some lame bulletin board that says, we're having a startup pitch competition on Saturday, and then there's a morning run on Sunday, and then next weekend we're knitting. It's not like that. It's chock full, jam packed of multiple daily activities. Right. And I'm not paid to say this. They're not a sponsor of the show, but they do many aspects of community really, really well. And I don't know how many analogs there are around the world. There are some nomad communities, but this particular way of doing it, where it's been curated and built up like that. Go MADEIRA if you want to look it up. Grayson, I know you're in Serbia and it's later for you. I want to, as they say, be respectful of your time. I hope in the last 45 minutes we've been respectful of our listeners' time, in the sense that, I don't hope. I know we have. We've hit on a lot of great points that I think can educate and inform people. That's not necessarily the point of the podcast, just to educate and inform. As David Brent from the UK office might say, bit of an entertainer myself. So I hope it was entertaining too. And it's been great talking to you, and hopefully I'll see you, somewhere on the Nomad Trail before next Running Remote. But I heard that it's in Lisbon again. It's been cycling through different cities each year, and then it was virtual during the pandemic. But when as you know, in business and in life, when something works, the best thing to do is maybe to do it over and over again, because you start to get economies of scale and efficiencies, and a community starting to build up. So I am excited that it is again back in Lisbon in 2024. And I will be going. I'm
planning on going myself. We'll see exactly what happens, but definitely want to say, appreciate.
Yeah, we won't hold you to it, but there'll be virtual sessions for anyone that wants to go. Again, they're not sponsoring this, but I think it is an interesting community that pops up around that event every couple days, every year. So any other things that besides Running Remote that you're going to as an event or a planned visit? Nomad Fest or Bulgaria. There's various other places. I haven't done many of those, so that's one of the reasons I asked.
Running Remote was really my first one of those, and I wasn't planning on it, but kind of last minute, I am going to Bansko Nomad Fest here in a few weeks.
Oh, nice! Bulgaria. Yeah, I haven't been. I'm jealous. I don't think I'll be able to make it. It's a little far from where I am, but if you're in Serbia, it's not so bad, and I've heard great things about it.
Yeah, I'll have to tell you all about it.
All right, Grayson, have a good night, and thanks for coming on the Remotely Serious podcast, and enjoy Serbia.
Awesome. Thanks again, Curtis.
Thanks, Grayson.